A blessed morning and a good morning and blessed Sabbath to all listeners and viewers as we continue to worship God in His holy hours. Blessed Sabbath to you all in the first Sabbath of the month of Tammuz. We want to welcome you all in the comfort of your homes so that we can enjoy present truth. Blessed Sabbath. We are going to study today an important prophecy which shows our history and where we are going, where we are coming from, where we are today, and where we are going. So they used to say if prophecy is like somebody who is driving a car. You know, the car has got what is called hind lights, you know, to display the letter, what you call the letter, the driving plates or something. I'm not an engineer anyway, but the police, when he's following you, they see these hind lights. They show you what is at the back, if it is at night. And then what else does the car have? It's got lights that will show you where you are going. In front lights. And what else do you need? You need also an engine, which is idling. So this is what a car is. So the prophecy has got basically that. It shows what is at the back and what is in front and what's idling at present time. So that's why I'm saying the prophecy is like a car, designed like a car, to show you what is at the back and what is coming and what is happening right now. So this is what we call prophecy. So the prophecy of Revelation will also do the same. It will show you what is past and what is coming and what is idling right now. So as we are going to start reading from Revelation chapter 12, verse 1, may we empty all the prejudices and biases and have a mind which is free from all that, which wants a learning from God, so that we can understand present truth. Now, from verse 1, shall we read? Revelation chapter 12, verse 1. Yeah?
And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth,
Right.
and pained to be delivered.
Right.
And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads.
Right.
And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth.
Right.
And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered,
Right.
for to devour her child as soon as it was born.
Right. So you see, that's the prophecy. I think if I can ask you to take at the back the pointer, so I forgot to take it with me. So that's the prophecy. Have you gone up to verse 6? So we are going to start right up there for now, and as we continue just at the back of the chart, you find that as we continue, this is the prophecy which has been written with symbols for us to interpret and find out what God is talking to us about. And you know, why is he talking in symbols? Why is he talking in prophecy, in parables and symbols? Why? Because only the candidates of the kingdom will understand this light. They will be able to comprehend what God is communicating. And those who are not candidates of the kingdom will never comprehend what God is explaining in parables and symbols. So this is the reason why he has explained. Also, the other reason he is explaining in parables and symbols is to protect the Bible, to protect the information, so that it gets to the right people. Do you understand? So that's why he pronounces a blessing in the beginning of the chapter of Revelation, of the book of Revelation, there is a blessing for those who will read and understand, a blessing to those who will hear also and understand what is being taught about Revelation. So this is why God has pronounced a blessing for understanding these chapters. Because once you understand and you follow, that proves you are in the blessed part. Or what does that actually mean? You are a designed candidate of the kingdom. So you will make sure His Spirit makes you understand His communication, so that you are not left in darkness like it is with other people who will tell you that Revelation is so difficult to comprehend. It's not even easy to comprehend. It will be very easy to the subjects of the kingdom. Now, when you read, which verse did you go up to?
4.
Verse 4, right? Read on up to verse 6, yeah? So we have seen that he's talking about a wonder in heaven, a wonder of a woman with a crown of 12 stars and also dressed only with one dressing, the sun. Now, read on from verse 4 up to 5, up to 6, yeah?
And she was brought forth, and she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron.
Right?
And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days.
Right. That's verse 6, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. Let's go to 2 SR 71.2 and understand what we have on that code pertaining to what we have read before we actually describe everything in full. Right. Note that.
Note that the objects shown in the vision were in heaven,
Right.
not on earth.
The objects that Revelation chapter 12 has said, it's a wonder which was shown. Read the first sentence so that we know it is not on earth what was seen by John, right?
And there appeared a great wonder in heaven.
So the wonder was not on earth. The wonder was in heaven, right? So here we are being told not that this wonder was not on earth, was in heaven. Did you hear that? Right. So what exactly was shown in heaven? There was a wonder, right? Therefore, read.
Therefore, whatever these symbols may imply, they must be of a heavenly origin.
Whatever has been said in Revelation chapter 12 originates from heaven. Yes, we are correct because the wonder was in heaven. Right? And what?
Again,
Right.
note that her only clothing is the sun.
So read the portion which pertains to the clothing on Revelation chapter 12. The wonder in heaven. Right?
A woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet.
No other clothing except the sun, and under feet the moon. You can see the moon there. So what was the dressing? We see the sun there, and the dressing is the sun. That's what the woman is dressed with. No other dressing, no t-shirt, no nothing but the sun. Right?
Again, note that her only clothing is the sun,
Right?
and that her crown is composed solely of 12 stars.
So what we saw is the stars were 12 on the crown. We have seen the women who are ruling wearing a crown. And a crown, what does the crown mean? That's what we are learning here. It's position of authority. So the crown means authority. Now, let's read on. Let's hear. Observe.
Observe that she is not standing on the moon.
She is not standing on the moon. Read the verse which pertains to the moon, right? A great wonder in heaven.
And a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet.
So she's not stepping on the moon, but the moon is under her feet. So you can see the feet are there. The moon is under there, right?
Observe that she is not standing on the moon.
Right.
For the Revelator says she had the moon under her feet.
The moon was under. She's not standing on the moon, but it was under, way under the feet, right?
we must carefully study the character of these symbols,
Right.
for thus only can we learn their significance.
Right.
Also mark that she was to be delivered of a man-child, and that the same was caught up to God and his throne.
Right. Read the portion which mentions that in Revelation chapter 12. Right.
And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule the nations with an iron rod.
Right.
And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne.
So it's correct what SR is talking about. Second SR 71.2. Right. Let's go to the next paragraph. Point 3, 71.3. It is admitted.
It is an admitted fact that the child was Christ.
We all agree there that this child, this woman, bear a male child, and now because the child was caught up in heaven, we all agree it was Christ. Right? Right? And so let's refer to the verse in Mark chapter 16, verse 19. Let's hear to prove that point, that the child was Christ. So prophecy should not be just a guesswork. We have to go to the Bible to prove all these points. Right? Mark chapter 16, verse 19. Yeah?
16 verse 19.
Yes.
So then, after the Lord had spoken unto them, he was received up into heaven and sat on the right hand of God.
So did Christ go to heaven? Yes. He was received in heaven and caught up with heaven, with God in heaven. So Revelation chapter 12 is talking about Christ. That the male child was caught up in heaven. So we have a proof there. Right? And let's go further. The symbol being of heaven, where are we?
Yes.
Right.
The symbol being of heavenly origin, the woman cannot represent Mary,
No.
the mother of Christ.
There are some who say the woman is the church, and this church is represented by Mary. Right. So, but the woman cannot be represented by Mary. But let's hear what the woman represents, right? We know Mary was the mother of Christ. But what does this prophet of Revelation 12 talking about a woman? Which is this woman? Right, let's hear.
The symbol being of heavenly origin, the woman cannot represent Mary, the mother of Christ.
Right.
But she denotes the church
Right.
that
The
was to
woman
bring
there
forth.
denotes a church that was to bring forth the male child.
Yes.
Right?
She denotes the church that was to bring forth or into which Christ was to be born.
Right.
Thus-
so which church brought forth where Christ was born? Which one is this that delivered Christ? Now let's hear.
Thus, John in vision was looking back beyond the birth of Christ.
So what was John looking? What period was John looking at? It was the period before Christ was born. And the woman who was carrying Christ, because why? Why do I say so? Because Christ had not been born. Christ was still in the womb. So are we together that the Christian church was not in existence by that time? Yes, because the woman, the male child was still, the position, the time exactly of the vision coming to John was when Christ had not yet been born, but was in the womb. So the Christian church has not yet been established. Are we together on that point? Yes. So which church then was bearing this boy child? Which church did have virgins who were preparing themselves to deliver this child? This is the woman we are looking at. Which church? Then we will find out. It has been taught.
It has been taught by some that the woman is a symbol of the Christian church.
Some, they easily say because the male child was Christ. So they say this woman who has sinned is the Christian church. Straightforward, without thinking. Some do that, right?
And that the moon under her feet is to denote the Mosaic dispensation of sacrificial ceremonial system that had passed away and been clothed with the sun to mean the glory of the gospel in the new dispensation.
Yeah, some people do say so, right? According.
According to the following, these claims prove incorrect.
Right, we will prove those claims incorrect. How? According to these proofs that we are going to bring, this woman cannot be the Christian church. Why? Let's hear the points. If the woman
represents the Christian church,
right,
how could the same church travail in birth with Christ?
How could the same church, if it is the Christian church, how could the male child be in the womb when it is the Christian church? That's the question. If my child is John, right, and I represent the church, which John is going to establish, could it be correct that the church I'm representing is the church which John is establishing before it is established? Now, here, if the woman represents the Christian church, how could the same church or woman travel in birth with Christ? So these are the important points to consider from the scripture itself, because it talks clearly that this woman was pregnant. But at what stage is the pregnancy? At the stage of the last trimester, to those who know about midwifery. This last trimester, when exactly? When the mother was in labor, traveling to deliver. So the stage of the prophecy was when Christ was nearer to be born. Did you get that? So the church which Christ is going to establish, which is the Christian church, has not yet been established. Now read on, let's hear. If the woman,
If the woman represents the Christian church, how could the same church travail in birth with Christ, by whom the church was founded 30 years later?
Right.
If we say she represents the Jewish church, how could she fly into the wilderness and remain there from 538 to 1798 in the Christian dispensation?
Right.
If the moon under her feet indicates the end of the Mosaic sacrificial system, why did it not end before the birth of Christ?
Right.
Since the moon stood under her feet before he was born.
Right.
If it had ended at that time, could it have been a symbol of the death of Christ? If her garment of sunlight is a symbol of the gospel in the Christian dispensation, how could the church be clothed with it years before the gospel dispensation began,
Right.
having been clothed with it before the child was born? Which one of the two churches, Jewish or Christian, gave birth to Christ?
Which church between the two, the Christian church and the Jewish church, which one delivered Christ? Which one? Right?
If it were the Jewish church, then how could the light with which she was clothed be applied to the Christian church? If these questions cannot be answered, then we are obliged to go deeper into the subject.
Right. The idea.
The idea advanced that the woman is a symbol of the Christian church only, and the moon of the Jewish ceremonial system proves incorrect.
Right. If this woman is the woman symbol is of the Christian church only, then why talk about the moon as a ceremonial system? Because in the Christian church, the killing of the animal had ceased. Read on, let's hear. The Christian church.
The Christian church was founded about 31 AD.
Right?
Or
Is it
not
correct? The early Christian church was founded about 31 AD.
or not earlier than 27,
Right?
at which time Christ began to preach,
Right?
being about 30 years of age. Therefore, the symbol points back at least 31 years before the beginning of the Christian church.
So, when Christ was born, and most people think Christ was born in in AD, and they think AD means after Christ was born. But AD means Anno Domini. It does not mean Christ was born in AD. Christ was born in 4 BC. You should read prophecies of Daniel chapter 9 to get to these dates correctly. So the prophecy of Daniel chapter 9 proves Christ was born in 4 AD. I mean 4 BC, not 4 AD. 4 BC, we come to the year Christ was born, before AD. So here, when we repeat that point, you'll find that the Christian church was founded about 31 AD, or not earlier than 27 AD, at which time Christ began to preach. He began to preach for 3.5 years in AD 27. That's the time he began to preach. So that's the time he was establishing the early Christian church. So therefore, the symbols points back at least 31 years before the beginning of the Christian church, for the woman was traveling in birth and pain to be delivered. So this prophecy dates back when Christ was still in the womb. For why? For the woman was still pregnant. What time of pregnancy? Traveling in birth, almost going to deliver Christ. So, which year was that when Christ was born? 4 BC. It was about 4 years left for AD to start. So when we know through the prophecies of Daniel that how do we come to the year of AD 27, that's a fundamental belief if you are a Sabbath keeper. And how to come to AD 31, that's a fundamental belief. If you are not reading Daniel chapter 9, that's your problem. But the fundamental belief has got those dates in the policies. If you want to stick to the policies will show that fundamental belief. Now, let's hear now the next paragraph. Thus it was the Jewish church, right? Listen.
Thus it was the Jewish church that brought forth the Son of God, and not the Christian.
Finish. End of story. Which church was present in 4 BC? The Jewish church. Is it the one that had virgins who were preparing to deliver Christ? Yes. That's the church which is called the woman. There, at the end of the Jewish church, before the beginning of the Christian church. Because the Christian church was to be started by Christ after he was delivered. He couldn't start it when he was still in the womb. How thinkest thou? Now let's read through.
Therefore, she, the Jewish church,
right,
being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered.
right,
That is, the promise was made to Israel that the Messiah was to be born through the nation by the particular church. The old dragon, knowing the channel through which the child was to come, closely watched with the intention of destroying the promised one
so
as
the
soon as he
dragon
was
was
born.
watching the Jewish church. So because the dragon knew that the Jewish church was going to deliver the Messiah, so was watching the proper church in the prophets, the proper woman in the prophets. When this woman is pregnant, definitely we are all comfortable that it was before the Christian church was established. We are all comfortable it was the Jewish church before Christ. If we are correct that Christ was born by a woman who was called Mary, who was in the Jewish church, then we are safe with that interpretation. Right, let's go. The old dragon.
The old dragon, knowing the channel through which the child was to come,
Right.
closely watched with the intention of destroying the promised one as soon as he was born.
Right.
It was then that the dragon, by the hand of Herod, slew the children that were in Bethlehem and in all the coast thereof, hoping to do away with the coming king.
Did the dragon do that? Let's go to Matthew chapter 2, verse 16. Did the dragon watch the Jewish church? For he wanted, through Herod, to eradicate this male child. The dragon well knew the prophets. The dragon is what is the dragon? The spirit of prophet, the very same chapter 12, verse 9 tells us that the dragon is Satan. Satan knew exactly that this child was going to be delivered by the Jewish church. So he acted through Herod to Edgar. Let's see in Matthew chapter 2, verse 16. Did that happen? Was he watching this church to make sure the young children under 2 years will be destroyed? Right, let's hear.
Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men,
Right.
was exceeding wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem,
Right.
and in all the
You remember
coasts.
the story when this light came to the wise men who were in the bush herding cattle? These shepherds, they saw this light, and they went even to the Jewish church. They couldn't find anyone who knew the prophecy about the birth of Christ. They went straight. I mean, actually, the angel had gone everywhere to find. Nobody was ready for this message. So the wise men who saw the star went through Herod to find out, we are looking for a baby which has been born, which is the Messiah. And Herod said, no, I haven't heard anything about it. Go and find this baby. When you find the baby, come and tell me. So the wise men went and disappeared, never came back to Herod. But Herod suspected they found the child. And he ordered all the young children under 2 years to be all killed. But go and read the whole chapter on your own and see how God made a rescue of the baby which Mary had delivered. They were inspired by night to rush with the child to Egypt. So God blessed that country that time because they provided rescue for the Messiah. Yeah, that's the only country apart from Israel where Christ went, right? So was rescued by that country to hide from Herod, who was killing all children under 2 years. And it says other children were killed because their parents were also not vigilant, waiting upon faith to God. So when you are waiting by faith and you are a pious woman, you protect your children. Mary was a pious woman, and the children were protected in the time of stress.
Amen.
When the child was rushed to Egypt to hide from Herod, but that was fulfillment of the prophets of Revelation chapter 12, that the dragon, let's hear what the prophet says in Revelation chapter 12, when the man child, the dragon was watching also this child to destroy the male child. Let's hear. Read from where you were reading.
Verse 7. And there was war in heaven.
No. Before that. Verse 6, let's hear.
Verse 6.
Oh, verse 5.
And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron.
Now, where they say there is another sign in heaven, right? We signed.
And there appeared
Right.
another wonder in heaven.
It was still in heaven. That was the dragon.
And behold, a great red dragon.
Right. On my chart here, you can see this is the wonder. There's a red dragon, right? Let's say the color is red there, right?
A great red dragon,
Right.
having 7 heads and 10 horns.
What? How many heads did it have?
7.
7. Why is it so significant to see that there are 7 heads? Mark that point. Because you find the heads now are the ones that are leading us in church. In Revelation chapter 13, the 7 heads now, one of them with a wound. Did you see that in Revelation 13? But let's see why is the dragon coming with those systems, which is going to put on the 7 heads. Revelation 13. So interesting, this prophecy. Now, but let's see this wonder in heaven, how this dragon was also waiting to destroy this male child. Let's hear a wonder in heaven, right?
And there appeared another wonder in heaven,
Right?
And behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns,
And 10 horns.
and 7 crowns upon his heads.
Right.
And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven,
Right.
and did cast them to the earth.
Did you see this dragon has also 7 heads and 10 horns? So when you go to the Revelation chapter 13 and see now the beast now in our system with 10 horns and 7 heads, exactly you should know you are coming from Revelation 12. Where they are, because this woman didn't bring these 7 heads. The woman didn't bring the 10 toes, 10 horns. This culprit there, the dragon, it's red dragon in heaven, has got those. Those systems that we are watching, thinking, oh, holy, holy, holy. Scaring them. Right? 7 heads and 10 horns. But the woman, the system of worship coming from God straight, has no 10 horns, has no 7 heads. This one. It's a woman crowned, dressing. The dressing is the sun only, nothing else. Nothing else. Now, brethren, we are studying something which is deep-seated in the scriptures for us to know and prepare for the kingdom. Do you understand? Now let's hear here. Let's hear what it says. We want to see how this dragon was watching also this child to be born. Right? Let's hear.
And the dragon stood before the woman,
Right?
which was ready to be delivered,
Right?
for to devour her child as soon as it was born.
You see, he's also watching through Herod. He uses Herod, watching this woman. And when the wise men did not come back to Herod, yeah? He made sure you make a clean sweep of all children under 2 years. And by so doing, he thought he was bumping against that child. Which was, how could he miss that child? But God has already inspired Mary and Joseph to dash off to Egypt with the child, because Herod was up to the child. Now, it is the fulfillment of the prophecy. Now, you should be knowing that there's nothing that happens on earth without being chronicled correctly in the Bible.
Amen.
So that's why we should be studying prophecy and enjoying, not spend our time listening to men. We should listen to this prophecy. The mouth of God, which has put it in symbols for us to understand.
Amen.
And once you won't fear nobody, you will fear God alone and God alone. You understand? It's really lovely to worship God, especially asking for wisdom from God to lead us into all truth. Right? Now let's go back to our lesson. The dragon then knowing that child. So we've seen how the dragon wanted to slay the baby boy. Now the evidence proves what?
The evidence proves that the symbol of the woman takes in both periods BC and AD.
So we have seen, if Christ was born in 4 BC, the woman was the Jewish church. And then also, when the woman was delivered this child, we see in 1831 now, we have an early Christian church. So it's got both periods, BC and AD. We agree at that point, yeah? Let's go.
Therefore, as the moon was under her feet
So what about this moon which is under her feet, right?
before the birth of Christ,
Right?
it must be a symbol of a period of time which had preceded the Jewish church.
So this woman had passed through this period. This woman, if we are correct that it is the Jewish church, this woman passed through this period of the moon. So the Jewish church had to pass through this period. Now what is it? Now read on. As
As the woman was clothed with sun
right?
before she brought forth the child,
So do you see this sun, which when John sees the woman, it's the only clothing that the woman has, dressed in the sun. Before the baby boy is out, it's still in the tummy, is dressed in the sun.
Yes.
So this sun was a dressing of the woman before the baby was born,
Amen.
before the Christian church. Are we together there? Right, let's hear.
it is evident that the symbol clothed with the sun, was fulfilled before the birth of Christ.
That symbol then must have been fulfilled before the birth of Christ. What is it? What is that? Right? If the moon.
If the moon is symbolical, then the symbol of the sun must be the main object, for the moon depends on the sun for light, and the woman was clothed with it.
Right. So this woman is clothed in the sun. But these two should be linked. You see, when they were created in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, created all together. On the same day, the moon, the stars, the sun was created.
Yeah.
So these are closely related. Where does this moon get sunshine?
From the sun.
When it is darkness, the moon gets the reflection from the sun so that it gives us. So what is it that was getting reflection from the sun to give us light? What is it? That's exactly what is happening. At night, go outside. It was new moon yesterday, so it's still a small crescent. Go and watch that small crescent yesterday. I forgot to tell you, if you want to prove it was a new moon yesterday, go outside and see this small crescent. It's about as tiny like that. But in the middle of the month, it will be a full round. Then you prove the month is in the middle. And then after this, the 15th of the Jewish calendar, 15 days from yesterday, you will prove the moon is round. And then after that, it starts dying off to form another crescent until the 30th day. Then we start another new moon. That's correct.
Amen.
This is the year in heaven regulated by the moon. The month in heaven regulated by the moon. The day in heaven regulated by these objects, the sun and moon. Now let's hear here. Repeat that sentence. So the moon reflects light from the sun at night. So what we do at night, because these days we are brought up where there are lights, we are coming from electricity and whatever. Go in the darkness, in the rural areas, and see what happens at night. The only light you depend upon is the moon. And where is the moon taking the light from? From the sun. The reflection from the sun. Right. Let's hear more from the sentence you last read.
If the moon is symbolical, then the symbol of the sun must be the main object, for the moon depends on the sun for light,
Right.
and the woman was clothed with it. Thus, sun and moon must be taken into consideration.
Right.
In Genesis 1 verse 16, we are told that the sun and the moon are to rule the day and the night. The sun, therefore, must denote a period into which God's church had been given great light, and the moon must be a symbol of the preceding period.
Right.
The great light cannot be the gospel of Christ in the New Testament. Neither can the moon represent the ceremonial system under the Jewish economy, for the woman was clothed with the sun, and the moon was under her feet, while the ceremonial system was yet in existence, for the child was born after the woman had been clothed with the sun. Christ himself, by eating the Passover just before his crucifixion, established the fact that the ceremonial law was still in existence 34 years after his birth.
Right. So 34 years, 30 years after, before he died, in 1831, he instituted the Lord's Supper after eating the Passover. So we cannot say the moon was the ceremonial system, because the ceremonial system was still there. When he introduced even the Lord's Supper, it was on a ceremonial date. It was still there in 1831. But let's hear the point.
If the above statement is correct, then we must find two such periods that would perfectly fit the symbols.
So what are we saying? We are saying the moon and the sun were there. But why is the moon under the feet and the sun above the head? Why? These are depicting two periods which this woman or this church passed through. It passed through two periods. A period of the moon, was under the feet, so it has passed, and was still in the period of the sun. So the church went through a time when it's in the moon, but it passed that time. That's why it is under the feet. And then the time when there is the sun. Now, but what to get where we don't doubt nothing, right? Let's hear.
The first is the one before the Bible came
Right.
into existence.
Did you remember that the Jewish church went through two phases of period? When they walked out of Egypt, did they have a Bible?
No.
But did they have a prophet?
Yes.
So where was their light coming from? From prophets. But where did the prophet take the light from?
From God.
From God. From Christ. So the reflection, which was reflected by prophets to the people, was done in the period of the moon,
Amen.
where the reflection of the moon comes from the sun. So the reflection of the prophet came from Christ to the people. So this church is the only church which went through a period where there was no Bible, but was only led by a prophet. But also, it also passed through, entered a period where the Bible was now written.
Amen.
This is the only church, the Jewish church, which had two periods. It had a period when the Bible had not been written. For we know the Bible was written by Moses. But it was after some time when the church was already there. So this church being led by Moses before he wrote the Bible and after he wrote the Bible went through two phases of time. A period without a Bible with only a prophet, and a period with a Bible, still with a prophet, but with now a Bible. So it had two phases of period. Now let's read on and understand, right?
If the above statement is correct, then we must find two such periods that would perfectly fit the symbols.
Right?
The first is the one before the Bible came into existence,
Right.
and the second is the one with the Bible clothed with light,
Right.
the written word of God. Thus, symbolically, the first period may be called night,
Right?
ruled by the moon,
Right.
and the second day, ruled by the sun.
Right.
Amen.
So because we got it in Genesis 1 verse 16. He created the sun, moon, and stars. So he says, let these rule the day and the night. So what was there during the night? There was the prophets. There was no Bible. What was there when the Bible had been written was the sun. So what are these two doing to this woman? They are ruling during the day or during the time when the Bible had been written. They were being ruled by the sun. During the time when the Bible had not been written, they were ruled by the moon. Clear prophecy. Now read on. Let's hear.
Therefore,
Therefore,
the woman clothed with the sun
right?
and travailing with child is the period after Israel went out of Egypt. And at that time, the period without the Bible, moon was passing
passed.
away.
Right.
Amen.
When they went out of Egypt, they didn't have a Bible. They only had Moses. And that was the period when they were being ruled by the moon. Then when Moses wrote the Bible, when they were in the wilderness, then it went through another phase where they were now being ruled by the sun. Clear? This is what God is showing us through Revelation chapter 12. Now, we shall bring forth another proof, because doubters are always there. You know, you cook beans, you find one bean even after the bean had been cooked so for the whole day. The bean is still like a stone, as hard as a stone. So this is an example that even if you illustrate a lot of proofs, evidence, there is a being which is still going to, they call it, they have a name in both languages. I don't know in English what that being is called, but in Shona they have another name for it. When you are cursed by that name, you are actually a person who is so hard, like that being. I won't mention it, because some people have even adopted those names into their proper names in the birth certificate. But let's go to our study and understand. Now let's read on. Yeah.
We shall bring forth another proof from a different angle,
Right?
making doubly sure of the idea that the woman represents both periods before and after Christ. Revelation 12 verse 14 states, And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place,
Right.
where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time, from the face of the serpent. Note
Right.
that she was given 2 wings of a great eagle. If the wings were not symbolical, what their object? As the wings of the lion and of the 4-headed leopard of Daniel 7 represents periods, as previously explained, then the 2 great wings must denote 2 great periods of the church history.
Right. So we see sometimes we have a diagram of a woman with both wings. So what are these wings? We will have that prophecy when you want. We have it. We will have it later on. But today we have. But it represents 2 periods that the woman has gone through. Now read on this here.
Thus, one of the wings takes in the entire church history from the fall of Adam to the crucifixion of Christ,
Right?
and the other from his crucifixion to the end of this present world, his second coming.
Right?
Thus, it proves that there is only one true church in all ages.
That's proof that there's only one woman. This woman comes from Adam to the time Christ comes.
Amen.
What do we mean by woman? The system of worship of this woman covers the entire history of the whole world, from the creation to the end. So you divert from that system, you fall into these 7 heads. Because it's also the 7 heads. We are told that what was crowned there in the 7 heads. There is a crown there on the 7 heads. It's also crowned. Yeah? A false system crowned by the devil, by the devil crowning, the dragon crowned false systems, these heads. And we see them in Revelation 13, names of blasphemy. So you see that blasphemy comes when you are not worshipping properly. So you see there are also systems of worship. Now, let's go to her crown.
Her crown of 12 stars
Now we see the crowns of 12 stars, yeah?
represented the 12 patriarchs and later the 12
12
tribes
tribes.
after they went out of Egypt,
Right?
at
So,
which time
This 12, the number 12 is authority.
Amen.
12 patriarchs, 12 children of Israel. 12, we saw even 12 gates of the foundation of the temple, right? 12, this 12. Is it? Now let's hear more. Let's hear more. I don't want to talk too much on this one. I want the word to talk. Right? Let's hear.
her crown of 12 stars originally represented the 12 patriarchs and later the 12 tribes after they went out of Egypt,
Right?
at which time the wonderful light shining from the written word of God clothed the church while she was travailing with child.
Right?
But the crown of 12 stars in the New Testament period stand for the 12 apostles.
Right?
Number 12 is a symbol of government.
Right. And even in our time, it goes for the 12 tribes of Israel, and the 144,000 are coming from the 12 tribes of Israel. So the 12 is there until eternity. 12 is a symbol of authority. Right, let's read.
Jesus said to them, ye also shall sit upon 12 thrones,
Let's go
judging
and
the
see.
12.
Let's see, Matthew chapter 19, verse 28.
Ye
What?
also
Uh-huh.
shall sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel.
Right. So they were promised, the apostles, the 12 thrones, they will help them to judge the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, let's hear this fact.
This fact is proven by the type, the 12 tribes. It will be noticed that in the reckoning of the tribes of spiritual Israel, the 144,000 by the type, Israel after the flesh, as in Revelation 7 verse 5 to 8, the tribe of Dan is missing.
Yeah, we
And
saw
instead-
it's missing. Yeah.
And instead, the tribe of Manasseh, the firstborn son of Joseph, is numbered.
Right.
The type corresponds perfectly with the antitype, for Judas Iscariot, being one of the 12 apostles, was cast aside, of whom Dan is a figure, and in his stead Paul of Tarsus was added, of whom Manasseh is a figure. Therefore, we see perfect harmony in type and antitype. The lesson in this instance, by these unmistakable symbols, teaches that God has had only one church, one truth, and one way of salvation for all generations. The same is also expressed in the words of Paul. There is one body and one spirit, even as ye are called in one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, and one baptism, one God and one Father of all.
That's Ephesians chapter 4, verse 6. So, even when you go to the 7 churches from the time of Paul, when he was preaching to the 7 churches, each period has one church. Each period had one church. God had one church. Yeah, let alone we have several of them mentioning different names and whatever, but it's one church. But the problem is the confusion comes when we come from Philadelphia to Laodicea, or from another church, a Thyatira, Ephesus, or anyone. The continuation of the gospel from one church to the other, from Philadelphia, where Miller was the leader, to the church where Sister White now was a leader, there was commotion there. That joining, promulgation to another phase is always a problem. Now, from Philadelphia to Laodicea, there was a problem. The people who were under William Miller had problems joining Sister White. Then now, from Laodicea to the church triumphant we were learning yesterday, there is still another problem, a massive one this time. Unless you realize what's happening, you will continue like William Miller's followers saying, we will stay here, we are allowed this here, we are allowed this. Yet God is now going to another phase, to the church triumphant. But in all these churches, Philadelphia, Laodicea, Thyatira, Ephesus, Smyrna, there was a leader, there was a prophet, there was someone, a messenger from God to lead these churches. And worse, the church triumphant is led by Elijah. Then we know that. So you expect now we come from a phase of Laodicea to go to a phase of church triumphant with no one leading. You must be crazy then. Because when Christ comes, he finds the 144,000 led by a prophet in the church triumphant. Now let's hear more. God's church.
God's church has been symbolized also by earthly objects.
Right.
We speak of the symbols by women, namely Hagar and Sarah. The former is a symbol of the Jewish.
Right. Let's go. These earthly symbols.
These earthly symbols point out God's church in different sections and conditions. But the woman, clothed with sun, and her eagle's wings, being of heavenly origin, denote God's true church in one continuous line, and her child, our only Savior and Redeemer in both periods,
Right.
before and after Christ.
Right. So who was leading the Old Testament church? Still Christ.
Christ.
Who is leading the New Testament church?
It's Christ.
It's Christ. So that's why this son still is above the woman. We have one woman, a continuous system from the old to the new.
Amen.
So when you know nothing about the Old Testament and you shun everything, you have problems in the new, because there should be one system continuing from the old. That's why we continue with the 10 Commandments, which we received in the Old Testament. It's there in the New Testament. And also, we are now aged to take the statutes and judgments which Elijah has been raised to make sure. Why? Because we wanted to continue without the old system to the new system. The only thing that has to be taken off is the animal ordinances that were pointing to Christ. But the rest is still binding with this woman. Right. Let's see the crowns, 12 crowns. John's vision.
John's vision in the 12th chapter of Revelation deals with two main subjects, namely the woman clothed with the sun and the red dragon.
Right.
The latter has been explained.
Right.
The symbol of the woman in the New Testament time covers three divisions. First, the apostolic
Right.
period.
Let's see this woman, the symbol of the woman in the New Testament. So take this one is the cross. That's the crucifixion. So we have this New Testament. So the symbol of this woman in the New Testament, it covers three periods. What are these periods?
First,
First,
the apostolic period.
we had a period where we had the first brass mountain yesterday, which was the apostolic church, right? So that's the first period, right? Next,
Second, her absence from civilization in the wilderness.
so second period is when the 1260 of coming from 538 AD to 1798 AD. That's the second period. That's the period of the Dark Ages, where the times and laws were changed, right? Third period.
Third, the last period of the church while in conflict with the dragon.
Right. So third period here, that's where there is more fights. From Dark Ages, or let's say in simple, from when Christ entered the Holy of Holies, 1844, to the time Christ will come, that's where there is heavy fight there. That's the last third period. Right? Read on. Let's hear.
The first and second period shall be explained in connection with another study.
Right?
An explanation of the third period is found.
Right. In 2 SR,
Yeah.
1 SR if you are 151, but we won't go to it.
Therefore, our intention is this chapter. Our intention is this chapter
In this chapter.
is to be briefly visualize the lesson taught by her crown of 12 stars.
Right.
We-
So we want to know these crowns of 12 stars, right?
We ask the question, who appointed these present-day self-styled apostolic authorities?
Right?
It is said that after the apostles passed away, another set of the same number have a right to be apostles. Suppose the claim is true. There are hundreds of churches, and if each one of them had 12 apostles, there would be a multiplicity of thousands of them at one time. And if that act had been repeated in every age, there would be an innumerable multitude of apostles at the appearance of Christ. If there have been thousands of apostles, it is evident by the following scripture that they shall never enter into the church, into the city of God as apostles. For inspiration says, and the wall of the city
This is Revelation chapter 21, verse 14.
and the 12 foundations, and in them the name of the 12 apostles of the Lamb.
Right. So we have the wall of the city had 12 foundations. This is what we saw. And in them, the name of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. Which ones? Peter. So, but what are we seeing these days? We're seeing so many churches, and they say because Christ had so many disciples, 12 disciples, so we are also other disciples, like other churches, like whatever. Who appointed all this multiplicity of denomination? Who did? But what is the difference? Let's hear. What is the difference?
What is the difference between an apostle and a minister of the gospel?
What is the difference between an apostle and a minister?
If there is no difference, then there should have been more than 12 apostles in the early church. For there were more than 12 engaged in the ministry.
Right.
Christ had appointed 12, but Judas was counted out, leaving only 11. After Christ ascended on high, the 11 agreed to appoint another in Judas's place.
Do you remember? Let's go to Acts chapter 1 verse 26 and see, because Judas had died, but still they saw when they were walking with Christ there were 12. So now they remained 11. So they started to appoint somebody. Why? To maintain the number 12. So in Acts chapter 1 verse 26, what happened?
And they gave forth their lots, and the lot fell upon Matthias.
Do you remember a man called Matthias? It was this voting by lot. Yeah?
And he was numbered with the 11 apostles.
So now he became the 12th. Do you remember? But what more did you hear after that incident? Nothing more. Now, let's hear. Therefore,
they made up the number.
they made up the number to be 12.
Now,
Now,
if Matthias took Judas's place,
right?
then there must be 13 such men according to Romans 1 verse 1.
Right?
Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle, separated unto the gospel of God.
So what Romans 1 verse 1 says, Paul was an apostle. But we saw the brethren there appointing their own apostle, who was Matthias. So which one then took the jackpot?
Paul.
The vacant space which had been left by Judas was taken by Paul. Matthias was appointed by lot, by vote. You know, all these people were voting and say, oh, unanimously, this one is one. We voted for a leader in the religious circle. You vote. You remain saying we are comfortable because the votes were many on so and so. This is what they did to Matthias. So it's food for thought for you. That while they were voting for Matthias, God had his own apostle to replace Judas. They forgot one thing. All the 11 disciples had been called by Christ. They were not voted. They were not voted for. Did you see any lot being cast by Christ to find Peter? Any lot being cast by Christ to find Nathaniel or Philip? It's him who decided that this one is a disciple. This one is an apostle. This one is... He decided. If it was these days when somebody goes to decide to take a fishmonger to be an apostle, a very grave post in the ministry, many people were going to denounce him down to say, how many O levels, how many A levels does he have when a fishmonger? They were going to denounce Peter. They were appointed by Christ. Now look at how high-minded they are. They cast lots and appointed Matthias. Did you ever hear anything about Matthias? At the same time, Romans 1 verse 1 says, Paul, an apostle. Listen, Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle, separated unto the gospel of God. So Paul was separated by Christ himself. See what the disciples did? they had voted for somebody who was not even near the gate of any paradise. Nothing known by God. Nothing. And we are in such grave danger. And where are the people asking, shall I keep the feast? Shall I not? The Matthias comes and says, no, don't keep. Matthias comes, no. Why? Was voted for. Was voted for. But Paul was keeping the feast. Do you understand? Now let's hear. Mark carefully. Mark carefully.
Mark carefully that the woman's crown has only 12 stars.
Only 12 stars. Whether Christ had many people flocking behind him. You remember 5,000 were fed. But he only maintained the number 12 to his disciples. 12 was enough for him. Whether they came flocking and he fed them with the 5 loaves and 12, he maintained the number. The number was 12. 12, not more than 12. Right, let's see.
Mark carefully that the woman's crown has only 12 stars.
Right?
And in the foundation of the city, there are only the names of the 12 apostles.
Right.
Which one of two, Matthias or Paul, is not recognized by him,
Right?
who laid the precious foundation of the holy city?
Who between Paul and Matthias, who is not recognized by Christ?
Matthias.
Did you hear when they say there arose a Pharaoh who did not know Joseph? It's the one that leads us today. Pharaoh. Joseph stands for Jesus. Pharaoh, who did not know Joseph. Now, Matthias wasn't recognized by Christ at all. But Paul, separated to be an apostle by Christ himself. Now, let's hear which one.
Which
of them-
one of the two, Matthias or Paul, is not recognized by him, who laid the precious foundation of the holy city?
So when we go to the foundation of the holy city in the kingdom, which name are we expecting to find, Matthias or Paul? Because they all have names of the disciples, of the 12 disciples. So when we come to the name of where Judas was supposed to be, what are we finding on that gate? Is it Paul or is it Matthias? Now read on, let's hear.
If we say Paul, we make him a liar.
Right.
If we say Matthias, then his ordination by the 11 had no effect in appointing an apostle. What then?
What then?
Is the first and last in Acts 1 verse 26 is the first and last we hear of Matthias,
Right.
but not so of Paul. If Matthias is the apostle, then he surely is not as worthy as Paul. Which one of the ordinations would be most honorable?
Now,
Is
how
it-
do we prove it is Paul? How do we prove Paul is apostle? Because of what he wrote. The New Testament is heavily infested with his prophecy, with his writings. But we see none from Matthias. Now, this is one clue you can prove. Those people you think they were voted in honest faith, they are leading you. Prove from what they bring to you, what they preach to you. Prove. The prophecies, they are there. Prove. Do they actually know them? Do they actually preach that you understand this Revelation and Daniel and Zechariah and Ezekiel? All these prophecies that God has laid them down, let them come and prove. For with Christ, they proved that he was the Son of God. Why? Because people said, never man spake like him. That was the proof. Never man spake like them. We said the other day, we said, how do we prove somebody is a prophet? He says, by the word. By the word the person preaches. It will show those who are candidates of the kingdom that this one is definitely for sure the prophet. How many books of Revelation, how many books of Sister White do we have in our homes? But if you read those books, you might not have to be able to produce those books or preach about those books in a way that when we have a prophet, we read the same book but produce it differently. In a way that people say, I never knew this book is so nice like this. Why? Because it has been touched. You know, how many people were reading the book of Jeremiah or Isaiah? But when Christ stood to recite the book of Isaiah, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, is appointed me. It was the same verse they were reading every day. But when it was read by a prophet, it made sense. It made sense. That's why they even they wanted to take him upside down to kill him. Why? Because it was the effect of the word which was pronounced by the mouth of a prophet. The same word which they were reciting, the priests were reciting every day, the same verse, which was not even sinking in the ears of people. But when it was read by Christ, it made sense. So that's how they would prove Christ was a prophet. Now, let's hear more, right? The question.
The question is clear. No man's hands are qualified to ordain an apostle.
It's clear. The question is clear. When we want a leader, we want something like Moses. No man ordained Moses. Yeah. I was telling you the other day that if you find a minister who has been ordained by anybody other than a prophet, question. Because the first minister was James White, was ordained by Sister White, the prophet. So when we claim there is no more prophet, then we then look and say, what about then if we don't have prophets? So who is ordaining all these people? Who is that? Because when only James White was authorized by Sister White to ordain other members as pastors, that's when God's Spirit rested upon the people who were ordained. But not anything less than that. So you shall find someone say, breathing high and say, I also have been ordained. Breathing very high, you know, God is with me, and God is with me. Listen, which prophet authorized when you say there is no prophet? That's my question. That's my question for the hour. The question is clear from the Spirit of Prophecy here to SR 77.4. The question is, read on, let's hear. The question is clear.
The question is clear. No man's hands are qualified to ordain an apostle, regardless of his high standing in connection with the gospel.
No man.
The holy hands of Christ and his personal presence only can appoint one for such an office.
Good. Right? This
unimpeachable evidence for the woman has a crown of only 12 stars. Therefore, who has the power to ordain another and thus multiply the stars?
Right. So let's see at the next paragraph.
What is an apostle?
The answer.
Answer. One that is separated unto the gospel of God.
Now, when Paul said he was an apostle, he says was separated for the gospel. And what is the gospel? A gospel, clearly Sister White says the gospel is that which is in Leviticus 23. That's the gospel. So what was Paul separated for? For keeping the feasts and going every way, demonstrating how the feasts were kept. That's the gospel. So you tell me you are also separated. You are separated for, and then you refuse the gospel. What are you separated for? When you are refusing the gospel. Now, let me tell you, it's clear from the Bible what a gospel is, and the Spirit of Prophecy goes in conjunction with the Bible to explain what the gospel is. When Paul says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, it's meaning the statutes that he was preaching to the Gentiles. That the time had come for them to introduce the Jewish system of the laws that were given on Mount Sinai, the 4 laws we were talking about yesterday. They were now introducing them to the Gentiles. So he was separated for that. When you are separated for something other than the 4 laws, we question that separation. Are you separated for that? Are you really sure? Yeah. Are you really sure you're separated when you are not separated for the 4 laws? Or you are separating yourself when you are not separated for that? Now let's hear. Therefore,
the word apostle must have a special significance and a deeper meaning than simply separated unto the gospel of God.
Right?
The Apostle Paul was called to be an apostle for the Gentiles.
Right?
Thus, he, with the 11, became the earthly founders of the church of the Gentiles, and Christ the divine head. Speaking of the gifts in the church, apostles are the first,
Right.
for without a founder, there would be no organization. Thus, the rest of the gifts follow.
Right. So start with the apostle. Paul was an apostle and also was a prophet. Next to that's why we find them linking, being the topmost. Why? They are the only ones which are allowed to organize. Why did Sister White organize? She was a prophet. Yeah? And the husband was the apostle. The husband, yes, it's there in the scripture. The spirit of prophet says James was an apostle. So these two, an apostle and the prophet, were invested with the authority to organize. But when you say we don't have apostles, we don't have prophets, what we have are the creeds and the church manuals and whatever. We run for dear life. Now let's hear about the crown.
The crown is her glory, and the stars are her only earthly authority. Here is a striking evidence that the present-day apostles are falsely so-called. A prophet may claim authority as a prophet, but never as an apostle. However, there is a difference between the prophets of the Old Testament and the ones in the New. The latter being under the authority of the former. In other words, he may be an interpreter of or a revealer of the Bible. For all the prophets and the law, ceremonial in type, prophesied until John.
Right. We understood what it is in Matthew chapter 11, verse 13, what it meant. That there is these prophets we prophesied until John. What does it mean? It meant that the prophecies were all put in the Old Testament by the prophets of the Old Testament. What we are actually doing when we are preaching in the New Testament, we are using what they prophesied. When I'm here with Revelation 12, Revelation is revealing what already Daniel has said. And what is Sister White doing in all her books? She is talking about Isaiah, she's talking about Exodus, she's talking about, but where are we basing our textbooks? Our textbook is the Old Testament. So they prophesied until John. Right, but it does not mean we don't have prophets in the New Testament. Like what people use the same verse to say we have no. But you use the same verse. You are a Sabbath keeper knowing that Sister White was genuinely a prophet. What do you mean? Was she a prophet in the Old Testament or in the New Testament? Sometimes, you know what? We need an awakening in our brains. When we talk that we have no prophet this time, we only speak through Christ. What do you mean by that? What do you mean? When we actually had messengers, heavy messengers, who were reforming, God selected them for reforming. And also Sister White selected as a prophet. We have her being called a prophet. And then you say we have no prophets in the New Testament. A drunk or something. Interpretation is correct.
Interpretation is correct only when inspired by the same Spirit. Thus, timely utterances are revealed.
Only when we have a prophet, then we will understand what was uttered by prophets. Who will interpret to us? A prophet will interpret what the other prophets wrote. If we don't have that figure who is a prophet, then let's forget about understanding the Bible. We will only understand when it is uttered by a prophet what other prophets uttered. Square. That's Peter 1 verse 20-21 says, no prophecy is of any private interpretation. So anyone who is not a prophet is private. Cannot make us know what other prophets wrote. In the same spirit which inspired Daniel, which God will raise a prophet who will understand what Daniel wrote and bring it to the people.
Amen.
That's the biblical way. Now let's hear more.
Interpretation. Not only do the annals of history prove this, but the Bible is very emphatic on the subject. For it plainly says that we are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone. Again we read, howbeit, when he, the Spirit of truth, is come, he will guide you into all truth, for he shall not speak for himself.
Right. We will leave that portion for the time. Let's return to our original thought. Right? Let's go. Returning to our down there below.
Returning to our original thought,
Right?
the 11 were allowed to perform the ordination of Matthias for a lesson to this present day with its new molded religion,
Right?
showing that God has committed to no man apostolic authority,
Right.
save to the 12.
God made that and made that written in the Bible, in Acts chapter 1 verse 26, so that we learn that no one will ordain
Apostle.
an apostle or a prophet. No one will ordain. That is the work solely for God. Right? And
The commission to the ministry is,
Go
Go
ye
ye
therefore
therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world.
right?
So thou, O Son of Man, I have set thee a watchman unto the house of Israel.
Right?
Therefore, thou shalt hear the word at my mouth, and warn them for me.
Right. So in reality, down there, in reality, the 12 stars, right?
In reality, the 12 stars on the woman's crown originally represented the 12 patriarchs, later the 12 tribes of fleshly Israel, and after that,
Right.
the 12 apostles and the last 12 tribes of spiritual Israel, the
Right.
144,000.
Right. So let's go down as a comparison of the spirit of prophecy down the paragraph which starts there.
Okay. As a comparison, the Spirit of God drew a literal picture from the flock of sheep and shepherds. God's people as the flock and the ministers as the shepherds. God's true people will imitate the sheep, and his watchmen will imitate the good shepherd who cares for his sheep.
Right?
Anything less than this is an abomination in God's sight. If we are to learn the lesson intended, we must first acquire a clear understanding of the type, shepherds and flocks.
Right. So we are going to go to the Revelation chapter 12. Want to advance with it. Right? Revelation chapter 12. Where you went up to verse 6.
Yes.
Right. Let's go to next, verse 7.
And 7.
So we now understand why we have the sun, why we have the stars, why we have the moon, right? And now we have this dragon with 10 horns, 7 heads, right? Now, verse 7.
Verse 7. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven.
Right?
And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil, and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. he was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him.
Right. So, but verse 6, have you repeated it? Let's hear
Verse 6.
Yeah.
And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days.
So we see this woman after she bare Christ, right? We know exactly the nitty-gritty what happened, how Christ now introduced the early Christian church. We saw it on the Brass Mountain yesterday, right? But when Christ left to heaven, he left this early Christian church, invested with all the statutes, all the 4 laws that we were preaching yesterday. So now, the entrance in this picture, as you see the diagram, the entrance in 538, say earlier on, before 538, Constantine, 508, introduced paganism to substitute. Because why? Why would the devil introduce paganism to those who were keeping feasts already? We see Paul, everyone, we're keeping the feasts in the new early Christian church, which Christ had established. Why would they introduce paganism there? Why? Because that's where there was the strength of the church. The strength was in the times which God had ordained. These times, we saw yesterday, they were also introducing, bringing the presence of God in their assemblies as early Christians. So it means God now had invested the early Christians with these times, and the presence of God was there. So the only thing to take these people away from God was to change their times and then introduce paganism. So we see now from 538 AD to 1798 AD, the times and laws were being changed. And how did we see that? We saw in Daniel chapter 7. Let's go to Daniel chapter 7. We saw in Daniel, that's why I say Revelation takes all its information from Daniel. So whatever is happening here in the paganism is coming from Daniel. Daniel chapter 7, verse 25. After the 4th beast, we saw all these beasts, 4 beasts coming. The first one was a lion, the second one was a bear, third one was a leopard, and then the nondescript beast. So we are in the period of the nondescript beast, which was the Dark Ages. So when in verse 25, we saw this mouth speaking things, changing times and whatever. Now let's hear 25, verse 25.
And he shall speak great words against the Most High,
This happened in the Dark Ages now, after this woman.
and shall wear out the saints of the Most High,
Right?
and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and a dividing of time.
So this is the activity after the early Christian church had been formed and rightly established on all the laws of God, the 4 laws, as in Nehemiah chapter 9 verse 13. So this introduction of the changing of the system in the Dark Ages created what is called persecution. For what was being changed? Daniel chapter 7, verse 25 in Good News Version.
He will speak against the supreme God and
Right.
oppress God's people.
So this is what happened in the Dark Ages. God's people now were oppressed by the times being changed.
He would try to change their religious laws and
The
festivals.
10 Commandments were changed. We see how they were changed. And their religious festivals.
And God's
Why
people,
would he target those in Dark Ages that will reduce the spirituality of the people? And we saw in the diagram yesterday that is the one that depleted this first Brass Mountain to a valley. Right? That's why the first chariot we saw in Zechariah chapter 6 had we said red horses. Why? It's the killing. Red is blood. It's the killing of the persecution of those who were saying no when the times and laws were changed. Now, so this happened in the period of 1,260 days. We found that by the 3.5 years in Daniel chapter 7. that verse, Daniel chapter 7.
He will speak against the supreme God
Mm-hmm.
and oppress God's people.
Mm-hmm.
He will try to change the religious laws and festivals,
Mm-hmm.
and God's people
Mhm.
will be under his power for 3.5 years.
Right. So we see for 3.5 years, 3.5, we just changed that 3.5 into days. Right? And you find 1,260 days.
Yes.
And in the Bible, one day, in Ezekiel chapter 4, verse 6, it says 1 day is 1 year. So the 3.5 days, you change them into day ratio, you find it is 1,260 years. Right? And then, because we multiplied 30 days. 30 days, because the month is 30 days. So 3.5 years. In 3.5 years, if each month is 30 days, right? So 3 years, 1 year will give you 12 months. So we have 30 months in 3 years. Is it? And then in half a year, we have 6 months. So add 6 months plus 36 months, we find 42 months. Multiply 42 months by 30, you find 1,260 days. This is the period we are talking about. From 538 AD to 1798 AD. Now you change this 1,260 days into years. It is 1,260 years. That's the period of the Dark Ages. Everyone has it. So this one we find because the brass mountain, which was established by Christ, had been depleted by the activity of the Dark Ages beast who was changing the times, the religious laws, and the religious festivals. Why? These were the ones giving strength to this first brass mountain. Do you understand why? Because he could have targeted anything, but he targeted the times. The religious times and the religious festivals. This, once you target those two, you leave a person with nothing, no strength at all. So when God is introducing those things back to us, He's trying to give us strength. But we continue because we do not want this strength to worship God, to be very strongly religious. We don't want that strength. So now we are seeing this woman had passed through it. And then we go back to Revelation chapter 12, verse 6. Because of this serious persecution happening in the Dark Ages, the woman, that same woman, was given eagle's wings. Why do I say eagle? Because when you go to Revelation chapter 5, you find in front of the throne how many beasts are there in Revelation chapter 5. And the setup of the throne and the judgment throne in the Holy of Holies. Have you seen Revelation 5? The verse which talks about the 4 beasts. Let's hear that verse. If you can't find it, just start from the beginning of the chapter 5. Yeah.
And I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book written within and on the backside, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the book and to loose the seals thereof?" And no man in heaven nor in earth, neither under.
Verse 8.
Verse 8. And when he had taken the book, the 4 beasts and 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors.
Right.
Which
so these 4 beasts, the description of what they look like should be before that chapter, in chapter 4. Chapter 4, verse 6. Let's see the description. Yeah.
Verse 7. And the first beast was like a lion.
Which verse is that?
Verse 7.
On chapter
4, verse 7.
Chapter 4, verse 7.
And the first beast was like a lion.
Right.
And the second beast like a calf.
Right.
And the third beast had a face as a man.
Right.
And the fourth beast was like a flying eagle.
Right. So we divide the period of the earth into 4 categories. The first category, second category, each beast, because what are these beasts? These are not beasts as we see animals. These are people. Why? Because when you read the verse in Revelation chapter 5, you find that these beasts will start talking. What do they say? So that you know that these beasts are not animals, they are people. But where were you were reading? Just
Verse
continue.
8.
Verse 8, yeah?
And
They
when
fell down, yeah? And they started uttering something, right? Let's
and
hear.
they sung a new song,
Mhm.
saying, Thou art worthy to take the book
Right.
and to open the seals thereof.
Right?
For thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to God by the blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation.
So you see, these beasts now are talking like people. They say, Thou have redeemed us. So these are not animals. But we saw this is a representation of the people in different periods. Right? They are represented by beasts. The first one we were told was like a lion. The second one was like a man.
Man.
The other one was like a calf. And the other one was like a eagle. So the eagle runs to be the last representation of the people in the New Testament. They are represented by an eagle. That's why this woman was given eagle's wings. Because it's in our period. If it was in the period of the calf, was given something which resembles the calf. Or if it was represented by a man, something which represents the man. But all other periods have finished. The last period is the eagle. That's why when you are seen in Matthew chapter 24 saying, if they say go there, don't go and don't go. But where the eagles are is where the carcass is. So meaning the people represented by the eagle are eating the carcass or the bread and wine. The bread and wine we eat is the body of Christ. So what ideally we are eating is the body of Christ as a carcass. He died for us. Where the carcass is, that's where the eagles are. That's a prophecy of the people who will be eating the bread and wine. The third hour and ninth hour, that's where the carcass is, where the eagles are gathered. So when he's talking about this woman flying, given eagle's wings to fly into the wind, let's go back to that. Revelation 12.
Verse 6. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days.
So in this 1,203 days, you see why she fled to the wilderness. Because the times and laws, we quote them in Daniel chapter 7, verse 25, were being changed. So what happened? Because they discovered the land which was not inhabited, which was America, that's when all the people were being persecuted, fled to. And they were given refugee status to start their organization, worship. In God we trust, worship. And you see, this is the only currents which is written, in God you trust. Something about God in the money. Why? They provided rescue to those people who were being persecuted in the time of the Dark Ages, and they settled and started all their churches. The headquarters are there. That is the eagle's wings to fly in the wilderness. So that place, other than the Holy Land, which is the vine. In the Bible, the Holy Land is represented as the vine. But anything outside the vine is the wilderness. So they settled there and established their headquarters in the wilderness. How many years? 1,260 years to hide from persecution. Right, read one, let's hear from that.
And there was war in heaven.
So God is just taking the torch back to where the woman originated in heaven. So to tell us exactly what is happening in heaven. There was war in heaven, right?
There was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon.
Right.
And the dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven.
So what was happening in heaven after the cross? Because this period soon after the cross. where this electrician was. But the woman fled also. This is the event happening on earth. But what is the event happening in heaven after the cross? There was war in heaven. And most people say the war was done before the earth was created. No, this war was done after the cross. You will see that it was after the cross from the verse. Right? Let's hear what happened. The next verse.
And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Now I heard a loud voice saying...
Now, you see here, this dragon, the red dragon, the tail drew a third. That is the third of the angels that he took from heaven. This is the tail. Tail is followers. So this were following him in heaven. But before the cross, the devil was allowed access to heaven. But soon after the cross, no more. Did you hear? His place was not found ever in heaven. He was cast out. He was no longer allowed to come back. You remember when he went back in the time of Job? When all the other 12 planets, including the earth, the 11 planets are still going to heaven on the feast. Do you know that? That's why we should join them. They're still going to keep the feast on a new moon, on a Sabbath. They are still upright with God because they never ate the tree of life. But the earth, the planet Earth, is the only one where sin entered. So 11 planets sent their representative in heaven in a feast. It was in a feast. And God was sitting there, and each representative coming from the 11 planets. But the planet Earth had no one to represent. So the devil went to represent planet Earth. That's why God asked the devil, where are you coming from? And he said, I've been walking about in the earth. Why? Listen, because that's why God introduced Job to say, if he needed somebody, there is Job. Job is upright. So they started debating about Job. It says, oh, Job is upright because you are blessing him a lot. That's why it's like God was, blackmailing Job so that he continues to worship him because of the blessings. But that was why the discussion about Job came about, because he wanted to represent the planet Earth. So the point is, he was still allowed access in heaven. You can see him debating with God in heaven. But after the cross, the verse says his place, repeat that verse. The verse says his place was not found anymore. Let's hear. When there was war.
And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon.
Right.
And the dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven.
No more in heaven. You see, they fought with Christ in heaven, with the angels. It was now. Why would God wait for the place of the dragon to be stopped completely after the cross? Why? He waited for the cross, so that the angels, the other angels who had been left in heaven, would prove for themselves how bad the devil was, how bad Lucifer was. For they saw him with his 1/3 of the angels, making sure the Son of God is nailed to the cross. They saw his activity and they proved how wrong the devil was, and that was enough. Because if God would do it before that, they would just have to suppose, oh, okay, suppose he's wrong, that's it. But now they had proof, because he actually incited the world to nail the Son of God. So when Christ went to heaven, that was the fight which was there, the war which was in heaven. And then they eradicated the devil and his 1/3 of angels completely out of heaven. No more. That's when, after the cross, he became angry. Did you hear next verse there?
And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil
Right.
and Satan,
Right.
which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night.
Right.
And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb.
What did they? They overcame him
By the blood of the
by
Lamb.
the incident on the cross, which gave forth the blood of Christ. So do you understand now that this war was after the cross? That's where the blood of Christ is. So they overcame by seeing the blood of Christ being caused by this serpent nailing the Son of God. They overcame. This is what made them proof enough that this man is bad. They overcame, and what? Listen.
And by the word of their testimony, and
Right.
they loved not their lives unto death.
Right.
Therefore rejoice ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them.
Right?
Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time.
So the whole heaven overcame the devil. They all were watching him on the cross, nailing the Son of God. They all were, they overcame and said, no more, no more. But you see, before that, they were still going to heaven, trying to incite other angels to join them. But when they saw this incident, they overcame and said, no more. But God gave a warning to those who are in the earth now. So he knows the devil was deceiving the angels, but now no more deceiving the angels. Now who is he going to deceive next? War upon the earth. He is come now. But do you see him walking down? No, you don't. You see him come in form of people who want to mislead you. Yeah. And the people have been meant to say that laymen mislead. No, it has never happened that a layman will mislead. No, check the history. The layman will always be sent by God to rescue people. The layman has never, in the time of Christ, the laymen were all following Christ. It was not the laymen who incited people to nail Christ. In the time of Martin Luther, it was not the laymen. Never, never. The people do not know who the devil will incite when he says war. And war, it's laymen. Laymen who are just told to come and rescue. You know, when the priest and the Levite found a man who was marked from Jerusalem to Jericho, the priest bypassed. The Levite bypassed a job to be done, and the job was only done by a good Samaritan. The laymen, they don't come to deceive at all. Laymen's movement never. God will never use somebody who is not learned to come and deceive. Never. The very people you think, my goodness, where are my good set of cups? These are angels. These are the deceivers. Let me tell you one. The deceivers are the very ones you think, I have proved this one is a man. God will never use a layman to come and deceive. Never. He's never done that. In any, check which record. Check. Wherever. You go to Adam, Abel and Cain. Cain was the firstborn. And the firstborn was a leader. Abel was a layman. You go to Jacob and Esau. Esau was born with hairs. Hairs, they mean talents. Was talented leader. Esau. The layman was Abel. Wherever you go, layman will never come. We have not got no time for that, you know. It's not our job. There are people who have jobs to do this work. But if they can't do this work, God will take laymen to go and do it. He has promised, I raise even stones. If men stop talking, I will raise the very stones or the walls to start talking That's what God does. Now let's read on. Let's hear. On the Revelation 12, right?
Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them.
Right.
Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea. For the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath a short time. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he
Right.
persecuted the woman
Right.
which brought forth the man-child.
What is his aim? The woman which brought forth Christ. So that's when the persecution started first with the early Christian church. He persecuted the early Christians. Paul, his name was still called Saul. Sanhedrins, who were after the Christians, putting them in dungeons of lions, in dens of lions. There was a lot of persecution in Jerusalem. And later on, after the times and laws were changed in the Dark Ages, it went to Christian, Christian versus Christian. That was the warning God was saying, woe unto you. He is so furious. His time is short. And the Bible says, when he was thrown out of heaven, he was angry. And he persecuted the woman who brought forth the child. That was the early Christian church now. Because Christ had already gone back to heaven. He left the early Christian church. And later on, it was when paganism was introduced. So when you come to us and say, you are now leading us and you are more on paganism, then we understand exactly where you're coming from. We're so fearful of you because this is what was being introduced there. We know exactly who you are. For we saw it being introduced in our brethren, the early Christian church. They died and suffered because paganism was being introduced there. And you come now and say, now I'm the one now. Listen to what happened next. Listen.
And and the
Yeah.
and to the woman were
Right.
given 2 wings of a great eagle,
Right.
that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time,
Right?
from the face of the serpent.
Right.
And the
so it was only in this period when they went to establish their headquarters in the wilderness. They were being nourished by God there. But when this period finished, after 1844, the woman should be back. Why is the woman still there? Why? Because this system followed her. The system really followed it. Yeah, we see it. The system following her in the Testimonies for the Church, volume 1, page 577. You read on your own that text and see how the system followed her. The system, the paganism system followed the woman there in the wilderness. For time's sake, let's read it. 1T. Right? 1T, page 577. The woman was followed in the wilderness.
In this state.
Right, in the state.
In this state of
what,
things.
What paragraph is that?
2.
577.2, right?
In this state of things, it was decided that we would return to Battle Creek and there remain while the roads were in a muddy, broken up condition.
Right?
And that I would there complete number 12.
Right?
My husband.
Is Sister White now saying now the road was muddy? Let's go and abide in Battle Creek. That's where there was plenty of her ministers there, right? Listen.
My husband was very anxious
Right.
to see his brethren at Battle Creek
Right?
and speak to them and rejoice with them in the work which God was doing for him. I gathered up my
You
writings.
see, they were still alive there. It was years. Just the organization had just begun. And this is what they were doing, still writing number 12. Right, let's hear.
I gathered up my writings and we started on our journey.
Right?
On the way, we held 2 meetings in Orange and had evidence that the church was profited and encouraged. We were ourselves refreshed by the Spirit of the Lord. That night, I dreamt that I was in Battle Creek, looking out from the side glass at the door.
So she had a dream. God showed a dream when she was thinking, oh, now we are flourishing. We are now prospering. But God made sure she has a dream. She looked by the parlor window. Let's hear the dream.
And I saw a company marching up to the house,
And watched.
two
Say,
and two.
I know these people. These are my ministers. I ordained them.
They-
2 and 2. They're marching.
They looked stern and
It's
determined.
in a dream, you understand.
I knew them well and turned to open the parlor door
Right.
to receive them,
Right?
but thought I would look again.
Right?
The scene was changed.
Then the scene was changed.
The company now presented the appearance
Yeah.
of a Catholic procession.
Right?
One bore in his hand a cross, another a reed, and as they approached, the one carrying a reed made a circle around the house, saying 3 times,
Right.
"This house is proscribed."
This house, we have taken it. This house, we have taken it. Right? 3 times.
The goods must be confiscated.
Right?
They have spoken against our holy order.
Right.
Terror seized me.
What was the holy order? This paganism which was being introduced to the early Christian church. So that's their holy order. And what?
Terror seized me, and I ran through the house
Right?
out of the north
She
door.
was so terrified to say, have we been followed? Right?
And found myself in the midst of a company, some of whom I knew,
Right.
but I dared not speak a word to them.
So the same company she had dreamt of, now she's in front of them. You what? Let me tell you one thing. All the things in Revelation chapter 12. Here, there was persecution. The woman was given eagle's wings. And because after 1844, the woman should have been back because should have calculated 1,206 years are over. Let's go back to the headquarters, which was in Jerusalem. But we are happy because when we see the 144,000, they will be back. They will be on Mount Zion. They will be back. Let alone let the woman stay. But the 144,000 are the then woman of the time when Christ comes. They will be back. They're still on Mount Zion with Christ. 144,000. Now, let's read on Revelation 12, right?
And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman.
What had happened there, what Sister White had seen was the serpent took water and to the woman. What is water? Revelation 17 verse 15 will tell you that what is water? This water coming from the mouth of this one straight to the woman. Right, what is it?
And he saith unto me, The waters which thou sawest, where the war sitteth,
Right?
are peoples
Right.
and multitudes and nations and tongues.
So what is this water? It took his own people. He has trained his own people to wipe this woman off. Take this woman off. What is he taking off? The times. The woman is trying to resuscitate her times, which had been blotted there. So he's trying to revive the times back. Changing back all the religious laws back, and then wants also to change the religious festivals back. Is trying by all means to change, but what is happening? They are being told that these times are nailed to the cross. Is the devil who is training his own water to come and say to the people who are in this system of the woman, to say they were nailed, casting water to the woman, to say these times, let them not come back where they were in the first blasphemy. They were nailed, please, they were nailed. They were nailed, just as eschatological and whatever. They are being coming from the mouth of the serpent to take off the times, because lest the second brass mountain can be mounted up again. The devil is so scared of these times that he incited in the dark ages to be taken off, to be substituted. Now he has come with so much power as to take them right off, not substitute, but right off. And what happened next? What happened?
And the earth helped the woman.
Yeah.
And the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood,
Ezekiel 9.
which the dragon cast out of his mouth.
Ezekiel 9, 5 angels ready. The 5 angels with slaughter weapons ready for those who don't receive the seal of the times. So you have got to select the people who have agreed to take those 4 laws and the times that have been changed in the dark ages. Now he's going to take them by numbering them into 144,000. But what happened to those who were saying they were nailed, they were nailed, they were nailed? He's making sure there's 5 men in Ezekiel chapter 9. That's why Sister White says in early writing page, in 3 Testimonies for the Church, volume 3, page 267.1, it says, study the 9th chapter of Ezekiel. You need to put the whole faculty on the 9th chapter of Ezekiel, for the slaughter is there, is coming. So that is the slaughter of Ezekiel 9, which helped the woman to eradicate those who were confusing the 144,000. So that the 144,000 take back those times that were changed in the dark ages. So that those times are back on. And one of the times, the day of Pentecost, when the 144,000 on Mount Zion, standing with the lamp, singing the song of Moses and the lamp. What is it, the song of Moses and the lamp? When the lamp gave Moses the 4 laws on Mount Zion, the 144,000 will be singing that song.
Amen.
You understand? When I come to that point, I feel like leaping high and jumping high. These 4 laws, brethren, that's the whole controversy of the devil. From the time of Adam to the end, we will win. We will win the 4 laws. We will win. We will win. As long as we are mindful for the activity of the devil around us, we will win by the 4 laws. Keep on holding. And what happened on the next verse?
And the dragon was wroth with the woman.
Now when he saw that all this, his water has been swallowed, the waters, the water that he has spat to the woman is swallowed, he was now wroth. What remained? What remained after the slaughter? The 144,000. The dragon was wroth with the 144,000. Why? Listen to that. Verse 17.
And the dragon was wroth with the woman,
Right?
and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ.
The 144,000 will be led by a prophet.
Amen.
This is what will make the dragon wroth. Because the times finally have been grasped by the 144,000.
Amen.
Led by a prophet, Elijah the prophet, coming with the statutes and judgments, standing on Mount Zion with the lamp. I don't know. Will you be there? Will you? I cry by all means that will be found standing on Mount Zion with the lamp. I cry by all means so that we are not deceived. Because if it were possible, he wanted even to deceive the very elect. The very elect will never be deceived, you know. They never. They'll know the great controversy. This great controversy is upon these 4 laws. The times. These times are the ones that will make us win. They are for our protection. They are for our blessings. They are for our seal, for our righteousness. These times, brethren, let's hang on to them. Let's hang on to them. We will win. We are not far. We are not far. We are not far from home. They sing and say, how far from home? The work of the act of the devil against the woman. He's got his own systems. He wants to put them to the woman. And the woman has got its own system. It's strange to all these 7 heads. 7 heads and 10 horns. It's a strange system, this one. But it's only for the very elect. May God help us as we ponder into studying the present truth, we will win. We will win. You and I, we will win. We'll stand on Mount Zion. We will. The more we learn more about these prophecies, the more we will be anchored and established in the truth and sealed. May God bless us all.
Amen.